Hello friends. Today we're going to take a look at the Jobs to be Done tool. I'll explain what it is, why it's useful, and how to use it in design. We'll also see how the job story and CJM tools fit into this. So let's get started. Let's begin with the fact that in order to create a user-friendly interface, a designer needs to understand who they're designing for. Because people are different, users can be different too. They have varying levels of experience or specific needs, and a designer naturally needs to understand their user in order to create a convenient interface for them, friends. Previously, the persona method was used for this purpose. That is, designers and product specialists in general would create these sort of imaginary people, avatars, so to speak, of the future product, give them specific names, describe what they do, what their needs are, and so on. And the idea was that designers, for example, when designing an interface, would look at these personas. They were often even posted somewhere on a board or on FigJam, Miro, and so on. Right. They would look at them and try to figure out how exactly these specific people would find it convenient to use the interface. But people ran into the problem that there could be way too many personas. Well, just imagine, for example, a service like Yandex, Taxi, or an online cinema like Ivy. So many people use them, right? And there are all kinds of different people, young, old, for example, entrepreneurs, with students, and so on. People are completely different. If you try to create a specific persona for each one, well, that's extremely difficult. It's impossible to put 100 personas up on the board, and when designing the interface, look at them and try to make the interface convenient for each one. And this is exactly where another method came to the rescue, the Jobs to be Done method. Let's talk about it. So people realized that relying on personas wasn't so convenient or effective, so they started thinking about a different approach. It was as follows. In other words, product specialists started to focus not on specific personas, it's on people, but rather on what tasks they have. And they began to start from the tasks themselves. After all, if you think about it, people, no matter who they are, business people, students, moms, parents, was kids on their way to school and so on. So they're all different, of course, but they often share the same task. For example, getting to the right place or spending an enjoyable evening watching a movie or reading a book while you're on the road, their tasks are the same. And the people working on the product realized this. They understood that it's better to start from the tasks, because even though people are different, their tasks are the same. And people started to formulate exactly user tasks, meaning what lies behind them. If we speak in the language of jobs to be done, right? Jobs are the tasks that need to be accomplished, and basically, product specialists began to call these human tasks, so to speak, jobs. And the products that help but accomplish these tasks are exactly what they call, well, essentially products that people hire in order to get their job done, friends. And that's the essence of the Jobs to be Done method. Previously, people tried to build out specific personas, like, for example, Masha, Fedya, and so on. They have certain needs and so forth. But then people realize that it's better to focus not on personas, but on the tasks these people have. And in the language of jobs to be done, these tasks are called jobs. And people essentially hire products in order to perform these jobs. Now, friends, let's take a look specifically at the job story tool. You've probably heard about it. I'll explain how it's connected to the Jobs to be Done method. Jobs to be done is overall an approach. That is, people have certain tasks, and these tasks need to be solved. A job story is precisely a way to describe that very task. These tasks are described using a formula that consists of three parts. When, I want to, and so that. So here, both the context of when, what exactly the person wants to do, and the motivation, why they need it, are described. For example, when I'm commuting to work by public transport, I want to read a book, let's say, so that I can spend my time productively. So this is an example of a job story, friends. Here, we're describing their context, that is the when. For instance, when I'm going to work, maybe I want to read a book or maybe learn something new, right? For example, learning something new might be even more fitting here, so that I can spend my time productively at work and not waste it. And in this case, that's how the process gets started. So we understand how a person in this situation specifically wants this. And for example, yes, for certain purposes, we might think, okay, we can offer them, say, a book to read or provide some posts if we look at it that way. Yes, well, a person doesn't necessarily have to read a book to learn something new, for example. They can spend time on social media, watch a video, or even play a smart app, right? Some kind of game or a logic game. Yes, those kinds of games exist. So when we look at the user through the job story tool, we understand what task they are facing, in what context they are dealing with it, and in general, why they need it, friends. That's how the job story tool is connected to the Jobs to be Done method. Jobs to be done tells us that people have tasks to accomplish. A job story is a way to describe that very task. Now let's take a look at the CJM tool. Where does it fit in here and how is it connected? So what is CJM anyway? Simply put, it's a description of the user's process, that is, the user journey. In other words, what steps the user takes, what problems they encounter along the way, and how to make this journey easier overall. And when we talk about a job story is also, right, a kind of process for achieving a goal. For example, spending time productively while traveling, finding tickets, or say, finding transportation for cargo delivery if we're talking about business, friends. All of this is a process. Even in design terms, this is a user scenario. Exactly. CJM, in fact, helps to make this very job story that we have, that is, the description of what a person needs in what situations and why, more understandable and systematic, so to speak. So we can take this user task in the form of a job story. Say a person wants to spend their time productively and describe each step in detail. This is exactly where the CJM tool helps us. Friends, of course, this topic could have its own separate video. Maybe I'll do that, but if I briefly convey the essence of these tools, without complicated terminology, which is often mentioned, then jobs to be done tells us that people have certain tasks to accomplish. A job story is a method for describing these very tasks. It's a specific formula for that, and CJM is a tool that allows us to make the process of completing this task simpler and more convenient. Why do we need all of this, friends? In order to create a truly user-friendly interface, it's important to understand that we don't just use these tools for the sake of it, as designers sometimes do in their case studies. For example, audience analysis or a CJM might be added, but it's unclear why. In other words, no conclusions are drawn from it. So it's important to understand that every stage of the design process, which includes job stories, jobs to be done, and CJM, provides us with information. For instance, jobs to be done tells us that a person has certain tasks to accomplish. A job story helps to describe them. Then the CJM helps to simplify this process. After that, there are other tools that are used as well, friends. That's why it's important to really understand why designers need these tools. That's exactly what this video was about. I hope, friends, that it was useful for you.